Good morning. This is Dr. Emmett Miller, and today we're here to explore new paradigm thinking, how to upgrade your mental software, change your mind, change your life. And, in previous podcasts and webinars, we've explored various ways to combat and to conquer stress, how to heal the body, and how to make specific changes in our lives. We focused a lot on the physical body and illness and disease, that sort of thing. In the future, we'll focus on performance, how to reach high levels of performance and make other specific changes in our lives. But in today's presentation, I want to expand our view to encompass the entire system, the matrix that we live in, and at the same time to expand inward, to focus on the very specific changes that need to take place in our thinking if we're going to change what's happening for ourselves and for the world as a whole. And that change is what I refer to as a paradigm shift. I'll explain more about that. That paradigm shift, I believe, is essential to making those changes. Now, I know this looks like a tall order, but it's not coming from out of nowhere. It's the result of my systematically applying careful scientific thought, compassionate clinical experience, and extensive relating with real human beings. Because I had the luxury of practicing as a private physician, not a doctor who was employed or controlled by any corporation or any other interest other than my own heart, what felt right, what felt real, in the privacy and the sanctity of my own office, not in a cubicle. In my office, where the needs of my medical patients and my coaching clients have been paramount for me. And this is different from the usual practice of so many physicians working as employees of a financial healthcare system that sees human beings as walking P&L items rather than as people deserving of compassion and care. I can't tell you the number of stories I've heard from physicians who are trapped into having to work in those situations, and the inhuman, insensitive, rigid, unfair, bizarre, unscientific kind of thinking that's passed on from above. And then, yours is not to question why, yours is but to do or die. 70% of our doctors now work for corporations, and the behaviors of the rest are highly controlled by insurance companies, very different from when I started practicing back in the 1960s. So that gave me the ability to learn some very special things. And what I'd like to share is some of what my 5 decades of investigation have revealed about the secrets of life and healing and love with a capital L, and something about the vicious scourge that is destroying our health and our civilization, violence, and how to create the balance that we need for personal healing and global transformation. We've talked a lot about the specifics of how to do that. So you know how to relax, you know how to use imagery, you know how to impact the monkey mind, how to enter the present moment. We're going to look at that from an application to a larger level. And as usual, I'll offer you some mind tools that you can use to create positive changes in your health and in the condition of the world. By 3 methods, we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is the noblest. Second, by imitation, which is the easiest. The third is by experience, which is the bitterest. And that was a teaching of Confucius. And so I'm going to ask you to reflect upon some things that might ordinarily trigger feelings of frustration or anxiety. And although the normal tendency is to turn away from the discomfort and the pain, that's the action of the monkey mind, to run away from the discomfort. I'm going to ask you to discover how deep relaxation and mindfulness can empower you to remain in the present moment as a pure witness without having to generate any stress. Because you are fully aware that at this moment in time, there's no other place you have to go to. There's nothing that you have to do. There's no problem that has to be solved at this moment in time. And know that, as the Buddha has reminded us, the source of all suffering is wanting things to be different from how they are. And give yourself permission to fully accept the world exactly as it is at this moment. And in this moment, allow yourself to become aware of your breathing in. Imagine that you're taking the first breath of this waking moment, your waking self, awakening to your life today, allowing the air to breathe in for you, and with the breath out, allow your eyelids to close. Place your hand on your belly as you inhale deeply into your belly, and then releasing and exhaling all that no longer serves you in this moment. Allow yourself to connect deeply into your core, giving permission to the deep spirit here to guide you on this journey today. And with each breath in and out, as the air breathes you, going deeper, deeper into this core of your being, tapping into the limitless possibilities that fill you with hope and strength again. Emptying your mind of all unnecessary thoughts. Let yourself drift back now to a memory when you felt strong and focused. A time when you had a sense of clarity and wisdom, even if you're only 7 years old, or a teenager, or a young person, whatever. One of those special moments. Picture it as clearly as you can and drift back into it. Allow yourself to feel it clearly, and allow the cells of your body to remember this feeling of strength and empowerment. Breathe it throughout every cell of your body, erasing from your mind any unnecessary thoughts as you allow yourself to be present in this moment with this beautiful image and with all that power that is within you, although sometimes you may forget, it lives always within. And feeling this empowerment within, allow yourself to open to the highest levels of your mind. Open to that wisdom within, to the spiritual guidance that you know how to turn to. Those levels that permit you to see clearly, to accept with serenity and patience those things that you have no need to change at this moment in time. And thus, tap into your wisdom, into your inner guidance, and to an awareness of your powers, of your strengths, of your talents, and of the well earned skills that are yours, that are part of you. And choose wisely before you choose to act. Good. And when you're ready, you can allow your eyes to gently open into this moment, bringing with you a deep sense of peace and connection within. That's it. Go ahead. Did you feel it? Yeah, let me take a moment just to express my very deep gratitude to those of you who have continued to send in donations so that I can continue this work. Please donate if you haven't as yet. Consider whether this information is valuable and send it in. As I'm sure that you are aware now that nothing is free on the internet. It looks that way. It's not free. And if you find something that appears to be free, then that's a sure sign that you are the product. But we do thank you for donating, to think about the value of those donations. That's what I want to express to you. This is Dr. Emmett Miller, and today we're exploring new paradigm thinking and how to use it to upgrade your mental software and defeat the propaganda that has hijacked all of our lives. Now, if you sometimes feel a world is spinning increasingly out of control, hey, you're not alone, and I suspect you're right. But how many of us feel that there really is something we can do to change it? Today, we're going to explore some of the reasons for the sad condition of this planet and some of the things that we can do to heal ourselves personally, to heal our relationships with others, and to heal our planet as a whole. Every day, as I read the news or watch it on TV, I am struck by the distinct absence of mercy, of the cruelty. Together, we've witnessed most recently the ruthless evisceration of Roe versus Wade and the expansion of the right to carry guns in public in the face of ever more horrific mass shootings. I'm going to feel uncomfortable in the city of New York. There's so many people in there. And what's that bulge in that guy's pocket there? Is he going to pull out that gun and do a little mass shooting thing here? Instead of rendering the highest standard of justice for citizens, it seems our Supreme Court has pulled off a coup d'etat. And it seems wholly indifferent to the lives of America's women and children and families. And then there is the horrors of the near coup d'etat back on January 6th, the unnecessary loss of 1 million people in the US alone due to the incredibly lame response to COVID-19. As a trained physician, I sat in stunned disbelief as I watched what seemed to be a movie of the Three Stooges responding to a global pandemic. We are all witnesses to a healthcare system that continues to see human beings, as I said, walking profit centers rather than people deserving of compassion and care. We watch in silence the increasing polarity and violence at home and abroad. Right here in our own country, every day there are 300 people are shot. And every day more than 100 are shot to death, in addition to the mass shootings. We can look out further and see ours and the world's failure to meet the climate disaster that's becoming ever more catastrophic, the growing threat of nuclear war, the gradual disintegration of our democracy. I could go on, as I'm sure you could. But for now just take a deep breath in and relax down into this moment where you can feel safe in this present moment. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, no problem to solve. But we can ask ourselves, what's going on? Why is all this happening? Why? It's our outmoded mental software, our lousy system of pedagogy, how we raise our children who should be seen and not heard, and one more peep out of you, and I'll slap your face around to the other side of your head. The abusive culture in our schools, the disintegration of close communities and social support system, and our lives finally hijacked by media propaganda. What do I mean? Hundreds of thousands of attention engineers hired by billion-dollar corporations to keep us feeling anxious and helpless, buying products, drugs, lying candidates, and guns. More guns to make ourselves feel better. Meanwhile, we here in the US, the land of the free and the home of the brave, sadly shake our heads asking, what's next? Like feckless frogs sitting in the pan of water as it gradually heats up, unaware of the meaning of the increasing temperature until we're finally boiled alive, unable to realize what's happening and feeling incapable of responding to it. Why? My experience tells me that this is the result of how we have been trained in this culture that has hijacked our lives. A hijacking of you. I call it that after a title of a book by David Gruder. What do we mean by being hijacked? Our happiness has been hijacked. We've been taught to believe that you need more to be happier, right? He who dies with the most toys wins. Is that right? Hey? We've been taught that prosperity comes about by going into debt. We've been tricked about our health by our sick care system that only treats symptoms. Our patriotism has been hijacked by fear, pop, propaganda, and polarity. Our thinking has been hijacked by the old paradigm. My hero, as you probably know, is Albert Einstein, who said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. I'll speak a little bit more about this aspect later on in the presentation. Let me just share with you a personal note. From my early childhood, I was deeply saddened by the destructive forces in the world around me that other people seemed to blithely accept. How people treated each other, how they treated animals, and how they treated the natural world that triggered deep feelings of pain within me. And I decided on a life goal very early to figure out how to change the world to a place of peace and joy and creativity, where there would be no more wars and where people would be kind to each other. Science, math, engineering, and then medicine were the paths that I chose to realize my dream. And in my early days of creating the mind body approach to healing, I gradually began to realize that at the base of all these extraordinary healing tools that I was working with, there was a new paradigm, a fundamental change in how we can go from being sick to being healthy and well, involved recognizing the enormous healing potential within each of us. A healing potential that is awakened by intentionally changing our thoughts and feelings and behaviors concerning ourselves and our world. In other words, a paradigm shift. Paradigm shift was identified by Thomas Kuhn back in 1962. He called it a fundamental change in the basic concepts and experimental practices of a scientific discipline. And, running your body and your life is, a scientific discipline. If it's not science, you very likely are running into some walls. Not, not to the exclusion of art, but bowling ball reality is real. Well, according to this new paradigm, instead of you being the patient one, while the doctor looks for a cause and then some way to cut it out or poison it, instead we begin to realize that for most of the illnesses of the modern world, a far deeper healing can be obtained by changing our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. My job was to discover those changes and learn how to make them. Now, 40, 50 years later, most modern schools of thought in medicine and psychology are incorporating those ideas. So you hear about stress all over the place, the need to rest, the importance of relationships, and even the notion of creating balance in our lives. By the 1980s, however, I had begun to explore how these same concepts could be employed to heal relationships, families, organizations, and potentially countries and the whole planet. Our culture teaches us how to differentiate, how to compare and contrast. Remember that from school? You'd break things into pieces and then analyze each piece. That's called the reductionist method, was championed by the great Rene Descartes. Valuable as it is, this either or analytic approach tends to lead us toward criticism, polarity, argument, othering, conflict, and stress. Sounds like I'm talking about a lot of the academic institutions I have known through time. And this has been true in both our personal problems and our global. We've had that analytic cut it into pieces. The new paradigm, as I've named it, involves looking for both and perspectives, wholes, integration, embracing instead of rejecting. In short, the holistic viewpoint. Beyond the individual healing in which I've participated, an understanding of this new paradigm is, for me, the pinnacle of my 50 years of study. It'll probably be 50 years before people begin to understand it, but consider yourself out in front of the pack. The final phase of my life vision is now to share this extraordinary tool for it transforming the world at the macro, social, global level, as well as at the individual level. Many of us have some awareness of this new way of thinking, but I have found that few people seem to realize the incredible power that becomes available when we actually apply it on a day-to-day basis in our lives. Okay, the basic problem then is that our personal health, unhappiness, and addictive behaviors, including getting in fights and starting war and just take a look at Washington, stems from the same basic root as the problems we're having in our society. We're making a disastrous mistake in how we're thinking. Personal problems and social problems and global problems, well, we will always have. But the question is whether or not we know how to think about them so they can be resolved and transcended. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them, said Einstein. So I've demonstrated again and again how most of our personal illnesses and dysfunctions are the very easily understood consequences of the fact that we are trying to serve modern problems with a brain designed to deal well with pre-civilization challenges. The result is accumulating stress, suppression of the prefrontal cortex and higher levels of the brain, the continual use of symptomatic remedies while the fundamental problems continue to spiral out of control. I saw that was true for us personally, and then began to realize that the murders, the corrupt politicians, the manipulative media, the hate speech, the destruction of our environments, all these situations are at the base forms of violence. Violence, all these situations, violence to people, to nature, to the planet, often blatant violence without a trace of compassion. I think I had one here that I wanted to share with you because I think you're familiar with it. Aha, that's it. That's Amy Cooper. A cell phone shot of her. She's also known as the Central Park Karen. And what you probably heard, and as you watch this little video, was she's calling 911 because there's a bird watcher who's there trying to watch the birds, and she's letting her dog run around off leash. And this mild mannered bird watcher says, please leash your dog. And she didn't feel that she needed to, even though that's the law. And the next scene, you see her calling 911. There's a black man. He's here in the park and he's threatening me, and tells them where to come. And she's screaming it into the phone. Well, uh, she took a beating for that. And she did. And she's kind of a national pariah now. But as we look more deeply into the story, uh, it it turns out that uh, Christian wasn't as worried as you might think. He was an educated man. And actually, what he had said to her, if you won't leash your dog, you're not going to like what I'm going to do to your dog. And of course, she began to panic. She calls up on the phone, and it was a poor connection, and 911 couldn't hear her. So she got louder and more strident, which is what we got to see on that cell phone video. So the story was a little bit different that you might have thought of. She was legitimately scared. He's a big guy. He'd threatened her dog, and she was in the park. And clearly, she was using her white privilege to call it in that it's a black man, but still, she received national revulsion. She was fired the next day. She had her dog taken away. She got it back later. She was doxxed. They put her address on the internet. She received death threats. She was charged with lying to the police and terrorized. She finally moved out of the country. Huh. Pretty vicious all the way around, pretty violent. Her behavior was violent. All she needed to do was walk away with her dog. She didn't have to pull the race card on him. He didn't have to threaten her dog. And then, of course, he probably made out better than anybody else. I think he has a show now, I think, on the internet. So he's kind of a minor celebrity. Yeah, it's unfortunate how we're seeing violence everywhere, and again, of how the internet helps to promote the violence between us, the hate speech, and so forth. Our mass media, instead of empowering us with information and tools for dealing with this central rot, our media is financed by those who are primarily responsible for the dysfunction, right? It's the inmates who are in charge of the asylum. Daily, every one of us is set upon by manipulative products of armies of attention control experts, paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to use highly sophisticated hypnotic mind control techniques. And as someone who's been practicing hypnosis and hypnotherapy since 1969, I'm telling you, that's what's being used, are hypnotic mind control techniques to convince us of our helplessness and inadequacy. And what that does is it causes our monkey mind to reach out for relief and purchase their useless products and toxic candidates. So my life's work has been to guide people away from this helplessness and to move us into a place where we realize you are not helpless, even though you've been led to believe it. This is your country, and unique among all the countries of the world, we do have the power to change what's going on. Your anxieties and frustrations and rage and guilt and shame are just the inappropriate behaviors of the monkey brain that only make things worse and paralyze you. Understanding a few simple principles and taking the time to practice, learning a few simple mind tools can enable you to conquer dysfunctional and distracting emotional behaviors. And most of you by now can stop any time of the day, close your eyes, nowhere to go, nothing to do, no problem to solve. And within a few minutes or seconds, Bring yourself into a place of peace and step out of the whirlpool and make wise choices. If you can't do that, you haven't practiced enough. Everyone can do it. Some people need more practice. If you need more practice, then it's actually more important that you do the practice because you're that far from being able to take charge of your mind and your body. But once you free yourself through that relaxation to reach your higher levels of thinking, you reach your inner reservoir of wisdom and your higher reservoir of spiritual guidance. Then you can harness the energy of the stress and repurpose it to produce peak performance. Peak performance in your body is healing. Peak performance in your relationship is the creation of sex and joy and love. Peak performance in the world is being at the top of your profession, doing extremely good work and working with others to heal our world. So I told you that I looked at love, life, and healing to know what they are. And I'd like to share with you a perspective that will make clearer that new paradigm. So relax for a moment and just allow yourself to imagine that what I'm saying is true. Imagine that we've been here some 13.8 or 18.3 billion years. I kind of get it mixed up sometimes. There was a sudden flash, what we call the Big Bang, and there was a gradually crystallization out galaxies and stars that the James Webb telescope has been so kind as to bring to us. And in one of those medium-sized galaxies, there was a certain star, and around that star was revolved the planet Earth, a harsh and unlivable place at first. But it gradually cooled down until it was filled with all kinds of inorganic elements, but no life. It was pretty dead. And by inorganic elements, what I mean is when one atom takes an electron from another atom, thereby becoming more negative, such as the chlorine atom does, and the other atom, such as the sodium atom, becomes more positive. They hold together when they're a crystal, but you put them in water and they separate. Very unstable. Explosives tend to be this way too. Then, once upon a time, came along the carbon atom. It was there all along, actually, but gradually, as things cooled, carbon atoms discovered they didn't have to take electrons from each other. They could share electrons. And that way, nobody became negative and nobody became positive. Therefore, we were able to grow huge molecules that gave rise to things like proteins and complex things like DNA, which could carry genetic material. And then one day in these ancient seas that were there, a cell formed. It had a membrane around it. But to remain alive, the membrane had to stay intact. If ruptured, it had to be repaired. This is called healing. If that cell could not have repaired itself, there would be no life now. So healing means maintaining wholeness, differentiating self from the outside, maintaining and restoring balance from within. Well, that cell had the amazing property of being able to divide, and soon there were zillions of these cells all around. But in time, some of the cells decide, hey, instead of separating, why don't we just kind of stay together and see what happens? And lo and behold, the solenterates. Very soon we have these multicellular organisms. And they got larger and they developed the ability to have warm blood so that we could have a much more brilliant nervous system and mind. And eventually it developed to the point of being the human being. It has exquisite ability to blend with and deal with the energies of the planet. But in order for that to happen, from the smallest animal, we needed to have a brain and a nervous system. And it still had the same purpose of maintaining wholeness. And so this ultimately is the result of the carbon atoms deciding to stay together and share a nervous system now that can carry complex information out to the rest of the body to accomplish absolutely incredible things alone and together. And in all of these situations, we see togetherness, because this is the marking stone of life. Togetherness, groups of animals, herds of animals, families that stay together, pods that stay together, little groups and flocks that stay together. And I mean, even down at the South Pole, how about those emperor penguins and how they survive through the coldest winters you can imagine while keeping their eggs warm? Just incredible. But in all of these cases, there is this energy of coming together. And perhaps the highest form of that is what we might refer to as love, such as the love of a mother for her child, any parent for his or her children. Can you see it? Can you feel it in yourself? It is this urge to merge, this coming together, whether it's to enjoy a child or whether it's to create a child. There's an urge to merge, and I call that love with a capital L, so that we can talk about all the loves, not just erotic love, but brotherly love, agape, all of them. The goal of all these relationships, starting from the first two cells that stayed together, is to stay connected. The integrity of the group is broken, then it must be repaired. That's the message that I think comes from the carbon atom. Love with a capital L means, to me, shared values, integration, inclusiveness, both and caring, intimacy, balance, harmony, empathy, compassion, wholeness, collective intelligence, coherence. Get a feeling of what we're talking about there? In other words, love equals life equals healing, or they're each one, all three of those are symptoms of a deeper whole, a deeper essence. On the other hand, at a certain point, living things discovered that instead of going through the painstaking process of absorbing simple compounds and building them into proteins, they could just attack and eat other animals, recycling and repurposing the proteins of those other animals' bodies into themselves. This is what I call the dark force, just to compare it with love and life and healing, which is I call the light force or the white force. The dark force is predatory. It's dominating. It doesn't work toward creating wholeness and caring, like for this poor fish. You imagine after swimming up all those rapids, this is where he ends up, in a bear's mouth. This is nature's grand design, well, not to a fish. You see, the predator has no respect for its prey. The dark force is willing to be disrespectful. It's all about me, me, me. And not only that, but we're also willing to be cruel to our own kind. That's part of the dark force. Little or no attempt to be fair or respectful, no soul, no spirit, no empathy. You know, there's some people who seem to be coming from that place of what I call violence, or you may think of it as conflict. because that fits what we've talked about before and the monkey mind. So, violence or conflict as opposed to love with a capital L, and there's violence with a capital V, of course. Analytical, either or, black, white, differentiating, fragmenting, good versus bad, exclusive, critical, judgmental, contemptuous, rejecting, debating, attacking. It kind of sounds like a political rally, doesn't it? And compare you can compare the two, the old paradigm versus the new, accommodation versus assimilation, reductionism versus holism, binary versus a continuum, either or versus both and, atomistic versus holistic, and so forth down the line. Opposition versus acceptance, defensive versus creative. Because I'm wanting you to get the sense of these two very deep entities that I'm calling love with a capital L, the urge to merge in wholeness, and on the other, the fragmenting, divisive, conflictual thing that I'm calling violence. And that we see in physical illness, we see it in anxiety, we see depression. This is the dark force at work. Addiction, rage, worry, and fear, jealousy, envy, greed, and lust. See, they're all divisive. Somebody takes advantage of someone else. And we as human beings, um, we we join in groups, and this is what happens on the large scale, where we take a look at the at all of these intelligent human beings who've gone to college, and they've divided themselves into almost equal groups out into the world. And one of them said, is that the election was stolen, and we're certain that it's stolen. We're willing to have people beaten. We're willing to have people killed. We're willing to take over um, things. We're willing to destroy the democracy because it was a stolen election. And the other 50% are saying nothing happened. It's completely fair. It's not a shred of evidence. What? You know? Right, right. The inmates definitely are running the asylum here, I tell you. Yeah, so herd behavior. Herd behavior is other mammals and birds and so forth. They form into groups. If you want to survive, you'd better hang out. You better hang out with the group, because that's where you're going to be most protected. It's a social behavior that's caused when individuals subjugate their individual will and thoughts and behaviors to the majority and do it that way. And what I see happening locally, currently in our world, reminds me of my experience as a young guy. In town, there's a North Side High and South Side High. Each town, each school has its own football team and has its own basketball team, has its own cheerleaders. And Northside High says, Northside High, we're the best. We can beat all the rest. And Southside Side High says, nobody beats us. We never lose. We never take any crap, blah, 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 blah. And okay, well, you go there, go to Northside High and try to tell them how good the quarterback is on the other side. Try to say something good about that side, and you run right out of the room. And you see the same thing with people who are supporting athletic teams. We're always having people beat up in the parking lot because they wore the jersey of the other team. It's even like at the high school level, even it's that silly. What are we doing? Well, there's a feeling of excitement, there's a feeling of safety to be in the herd, and to be outside the herd, everybody's looking at you. Well, as I said, our our sense of wholeness and self-respect and inner power has been sapped by this foolish world that we live in. Um, Let me say just a little bit more about the creation of this. And this is a part of a 2 or 3 part presentation because in our next one, I want to give you some more specific techniques that we can use. But we've all had experience of some love and some conflict or violence. But the major problem most people are unaware of is that the old paradigm of might makes right is so much more common than that of love, and that is at the essence of our problem. In my practice, I worked with people through age regression analysis, treating problems from headaches to Parkinsonism to high blood pressure to social anxiety, gastrointestinal illness, you name it. What we would do is in a state of deep relaxation, total trust, have the individual go back to specific traumatic events in their lives and chains of events. That trauma that happened in their life was the result of their immature mind being faced with a crisis, a seeming to the little brain, a life or death crisis. I mean, you hear how a baby, when it rolls over on the diaper pin, it is life or death. So when you hit that kind of experience as a child, you go into denial, fight, flight, hysteria, and other unhealthy internal states. Future events in that child's life will then trigger the same reactions by the monkey mind, where all of this is held out of consciousness, unless we use something like hypnosis to go in and ferret it out. And running away from this inner pain, we run to addiction. We get depression to get away. We withdraw. We use anger. We have fury, and on and on and on and on. We drink and go to various addictions and so forth. Whereas by going back to that time and deconditioning the reaction the way I learned it from Sir Pavlov, we can decondition it and we can write a new script the same way we write a new program. In other words, the illness that you have is the result of an algorithm that's being carried on in your mind. Rewrite that algorithm, write a new one. So that's at the personal level. That's the root of the vast majority of all of our problems. It seems extreme, but if you've been with me through all of these meditations, and you can always go back to drmiller.com/life meditations, and you can see all the evidence that I've given for this. And now up to the larger level in politics. Here in our country, where the union that was our nation formed by mutual respect and compromise. Oh, people saw things differently, and you would say to someone in a political discussion, well, thank you for sharing your opinion. I respect you and your opinion. However, I see the situation differently, and I've come to a different conclusion, and I'd like to share that with you. That's the way it used to be. You remember? No more. Now it goes like this: I'm right, you're wrong, and you're a freaking idiot. That's all. Over and over and over again. Just, turn on, uh, turn on MSNBC, turn on Fox News. You're not seeing respect, you're seeing contempt. You're seeing the old paradigm at work. You're seeing that which is the main threat to the life force, the main threat to love. And that's what we need to do, is, is to shift to a new way of thinking about things, what I call a new paradigm. You can't get rid of the old paradigm. You have to eat. In order to eat, you have to kill something, even if it's just a carrot, unless you're living off of air. Okay, so you have to do it that way. And if we're doing basic science in the lab, yeah, you have to be analytic, extremely analytic. However, there's another way to deal with the world that we can learn to love. Learn to love, learn to love your enemies as yourself. Or as Gandhi said, your greatest ally is the part of your adversary that knows what is right. I mean, every deeply wise person has come to the same conclusion. But it's so easy because we've been trained to go to the negative. So before you make a decision to go in a negative direction, remember the girls that are fighting over the orange, and the father cuts it in half, gives each girl half, and oh, that's pretty good. But the mother said, what did you want the orange for? And the first one said, I wanted the flesh of the orange for a fruit salad, and asked the other, what did you want it for? She said, I wanted the rind of the orange to make marmalade. So she divided the same orange differently. Well, we don't know how to do that. And we are suffering from what's called the tragedy of the commons. And I think the growing number of billionaires in our country are really showing the tragedy of the commons. If you haven't read about it, read about it. Where we don't know how to share, where we actually think, our political parties think one of them thinks they're going to win. What are you going to win? We have two huge enemies out there in the world and a bunch of little enemies also, at least one of which has intercontinental ballistic missiles that can, uh, kill a million people with a push of a button. We're busy fighting over ourselves, fighting for what? So that we can prevent Black women, young girls, poor people in the South from being able to choose to live a successful life. And that's what we're fighting about. I don't know. But so here's what we're going to learn next time then, how to approach situations where we are actively seeking to think in a different way about the world. A little bit about new paradigm thinking. Mm, well, I would say that when you come upon a situation, usually you'll be signaled that you're approaching it according to the old paradigm, which is what the monkey mind does. That's all it knows how to do. It doesn't know the other until we really take the time to teach it, because it's had millions of years to evolve to save our lives. So it's been trained by the environment to be. And you'll feel anxiety. That means your monkey mind thinks that you'd better run or you're going to die in the next few seconds, or you'd better fight or you're going to die in the next few seconds, or you feel anger, which says you need to destroy something in the world or someone else in the world, or you feel resentment or you feel jealous. You feel feelings like that. When those come along, recognize those are old paradigm thoughts. Those are the dark force kinds of thoughts. And you can think that, but you can also think a different way. But to think that different way, you need to get rid of the feeling. I mean, once you've determined that, that a safe is not about to fall on your head, then you get out of the way. But once you're aware that you can be safe, be still, come into that quiet place within. Remember love. Remember the importance of love. Remember what love feels like. Access love within you in some of the ways that we've practiced. And then witness the situation just took place and see, is there a way that this can be solved at a higher level so that everybody's a winner? Is the way is there a way that I can learn? Because a lot of times people make mistakes thinking and they get furious because they made a mistake and they may even break the thing that they made in anger. Yeah, well, what's that doing? It's all old paradigm kinds of ways of looking at things instead of saying, that's the third time I've created something with that defect. Let me relax. Maybe I need to learn something. Maybe there's a different way I could go about this. You expand, you expand, and then you see another way to do it. That's what the new paradigm thinking is all about. And it's the same thing at the level of the family or the community. How can you find the wholeness and aim toward that? Okay. Well, for those who want to learn a little bit more, you can always come to my website, drmiller.com, drmiller.com. And from there, you can also go to shop.drmiller.com, which is where you can see some 40 years worth of products that I've put out there, including Deep Healing, the book I wrote toward the end of the last century, in which I tried to summarize what I had learned from my first days of working with mind-body medicine. More to the point of what we're talking today is Our Culture on the Couch, 7 Steps to Global Healing, written in the 2009 or so, where interestingly enough, I predicted all the stuff that's going on right now. Unfortunately, the 7 Steps to Global Healing that I put, and I think not enough people got to the end of the book, or nobody else tried to use them, at least not enough of us. Awakening the leader within. Every one of us is a leader. That doesn't mean you have to stand out front with a sword up in the air. That's not how leadership is. Sometimes the leader is the quietest person in the room, you know that. But you have to find your leader within. So there are 4 experiences on that CD or MP3 that's useful. Healing Our Planet are some meditations to begin to envision where we might be able to go if we choose to do so on our planet. Next month, we will continue with the topic of today, which has to do with really learning the new paradigm and how to apply it on a day-to-day basis to make your life a life of love, life of success, a life of happiness, a life of deep communication and connection with people. I might be able to finish it in one more session, but we'll see. Only other, as most of you may have heard, but Live Life. I'll post a link so you can get to Live Life. It's a movie I made 15, 20 years ago or something, and things you'll watch some real people solve some very, very major problems in their lives through using the techniques that we're working on here. You can always write to me, write to drmiller@drmiller.com. It's being sold by Amazon Prime. Thank you so much for being here with me. Take care.